Hello, everyone. Welcome to the podcast. I have a special guest here. His name is Chris. He's one of my massage therapists that I've had for 3 years. And I appreciate Chris's knowledge. I do travel an hour and a half to go see him, and it's worth every mile. So go ahead, Chris, introduce yourself, what you do exactly, and we'll go from there.
All right. Thank you, Desi. So my name's Chris Everson. I own Chris Everson Massage Therapy. It's very original. Um, but I guess before I get too far into what I do, medically liability wise, I have to say what I'm providing for information is not meant to diagnose or treat in any way, shape, or form. There's a lot more to what I do than just basically what we can touch on in the time that we have. Because like Desi said, we've worked together for quite a few years, and
Hmm.
I don't think that either one of us would necessarily be at the point where we're at if we hadn't developed that relationship and have gone through the treatments together. So as much as I want to be like, oh yeah, it follows this simplicity, it absolutely does not. Um,
Correct.
so my background is in physical therapy. I'm a physical therapist assistant, and then I'm also a licensed massage therapist. I specialize in a little bit of, I guess, everything. I do a myofascial release. I do active release technique. I do Graston treatments as well with instruments. Desi has received, I think, each and every one of those in some form or another.
Yes,
Um,
probably all of it.
yep. And I generally am someone that I don't abide by one treatment philosophy or another. I tend to treat the person how they come in that day and how they're presenting. I'm not someone that just like tries to be cookie cutter. I don't. My brain does not work in a cookie cutter manner. It likes to get to the deep, gritty parts of what make people tick, and usually those are the parts that need to be released physically and emotionally to actually get the person to the next level. So my goal is to really treat people. Usually it starts physically because that's how people come in. Oh, I have this pain, and then we kind of chip away at the barriers to really get to the core issue. So I'm not a psychologist by any means. I can't predict the future, no matter what Desi says, and uh,
He already knows.
so that's my background so far.
Yeah, so I do like great point, Chris. Like I do have a relationship with the ones that I have on my podcast, folks. Like I recognize that I'm extremely hard-headed and stubborn, and I'm very upfront about that. Um,
Mhm.
and so I have learned about myself that we can he can offer you the services, but if you're not honest and upfront about what you do, the time that he spends with you, let's say once a month for an hour, it's not going to fix the problem that you created for 10 years.
Right. Mhm.
So, and a lot of people that have, and I'm guilty of it. So if it took 10 years to create the problem, it's not going to be fixed in an hour.
I'd like to think I'm that good, but very rarely does that ever occur.
So I've learned my lesson, but I have also learned, and the reason why I have Chris on, because meeting him and the other people that have helped me, it's definitely been extremely helpful to be able to do what I do versus the other alternatives I have been offered. But I'm also, like I said, I'm extremely honest with myself. And like he said, none of us are psychologists, but there are reasons why we physically are folding or hurting. And
Yep.
we can get to the physical part, but eventually we need to know the core reason of why these things are happening.
Mhm.
So
Absolutely.
one of the things that I when I first met Chris and when I first started going into bodybuilding, I had a hard time sleeping. I had insomnia like crazy. Now, I'm gonna tell you what took care of my insomnia problems. Subconsciously, I went through sleep therapy. I went to sleep this, sleep that. I took sleep medication and all this stuff. And being in the military, it started for over 20 years. It wasn't until this conversation that my sleep went like this. Now, I'm not saying it's going to help for everyone, but it definitely changed for me. Chris knows I'm a very, very disciplined athlete. Like
Very.
I'm maybe a little too. I'm like, he knows that I'm obsessed with my arms. So like I'm upfront about it
Yep.
right away. But he also can tell by my muscles how much work I put in. So I don't
Mhm.
even need to lie to him or hold back information. He can tell by how fatigued my muscles are that if either I'm either overworking and and he can tell by my diet and by my sleep everything like my muscles are going to snitch on me.
Absolutely. Without, I mean, I can usually tell people who have. Uh, I had one client come in one time, and he's like, "It's like, so how's everything feel today?" I was like, "Well, you kind of had a lot to drink this weekend, huh?" He goes, "What do you mean?" I was like, "Your liver feels atrocious. Your ribs are awful." Like he just had so much inflammation around basically the processing systems of his body that I was like, this is the problem." And he goes, "Ah, why are you right?"
Right. So you can't hide from Chris. Like Chris knows. Get you a shirt. This is Chris knows. So and so a lot of people, right? Um, before I get into it, a lot of people assume that they're like if you overtrain, it's going to be helpful. But just because you overtrain and you lack on sleep and you lack on nutrition, that you're actually a hardcore athlete, and that's not like you need all of it, and your
Absolutely.
muscles will snitch on you. So one time, I think I was heading towards peak week, and my I was just fatigued, and he said something to me that made me go click. He says, uh, I'm gonna misquote you, but this is I'm gonna try to say it so you can
That
finish it. Like, no matter what I did, it wouldn't have been helpful unless I slept.
mhm.
Okay, can you finish that part? Because I said it terribly.
So no, you were pretty much spot on with that. I told Desi that no, that your body can only is sleep is its time to rebuild. So if you're not sleeping, you can't really build. You can go crazy in the gym, but you're not going to have the same type of strength gains, hypertrophy gains, just because your body is depleted physically, hormonally. Every basic system needs sleep. So when Desi was like, "I'm not sleeping," I was like, "Well, you're overtrained," because one of the first symptoms of overtraining is you're not sleeping. And you're also coming into peak week. And now, for those of you that don't know what peak week is basically you cut your calories and you increase your exercise and you hope to just get through it. So I knew what Desi had to do. So I said, "You're going to do this because it's who you are. You're going to do this whether I tell you to or not." But I said, "You have to sleep to actually make this better." I said, "No matter what you do, no matter what I do, you have to physically actually shut down, recover to get to the next level."
And so when he told me that, something had clicked because I was waking up at 3:30 in the morning to be because I was still working full time. I still am, and I was coach like I had my gym afterwards. So I didn't have time in the evening. So I was only had time in the morning. And so it's like something just clicked. I'm like, if I don't get sleep, I'm wasting my training. And that hurt my feelings because I was like, I'm putting 3 hours in every single day. I have a strict diet. I'm making all these sacrifices from going out, and I'm not making progress because I'm not going to sleep. And then somehow, subconsciously, my sleep has been like this. And I think subconsciously, it was like my body, I don't know, in this weird way. And when I tell you, like, for 20 years, I had insomnia, but like when I am the reason I'm not making progress, like that bothers me to another level.
It's also surprising how many people you need to tell that just need to rest. Like most
Hmm.
people, we're just we go from the minute we hit the floor. We have our coffee, we get up, we do our exercise routine, we get the kids on the bus, we go to work, we maybe do the gym afterwards, and then we make dinner, we throw on Netflix for an hour, and then we go to bed. And we just repeat and repeat and repeat and repeat. And
Hmm.
the body needs it as much as we like routine and crave routine as human beings. We also need to just
Right.
decompress and shut down.
And
So
that was, yeah. So ever since then, I've had, I've like, I always tell myself, don't throw away your progress. And I go to sleep. Like it's like the craziest thing. Like I needed Chris 20 years ago, but as soon as he said that, like it came over. But I just I think it was like knowing like because bodybuilding is not cheap. Knowing how
Yep.
much money I put in, knowing how much time I put in, and you mean like I'm throwing all this away because of sleep? Like
Mm.
absolutely not. Like we shutting down right now. And it's I mean like literally that's all I needed because you assume like if I put into work and I push myself and through the pain and everything, like I'm just this hardcore athlete. No, like you're putting all this work and it's not doing nothing for you.
Yeah. And oh, what was I gonna say? Uh, it- I'll come back to it. It
Okay.
had to do with making sure that just that you had enough rest, and I'll come back to that because
Okay. Yeah,
it in
because
here,
yeah, it was all I needed to hear. So thanks, Chris, for that.
you're welcome. But the funny part is too, like for most military people, you can tell them what to do and they do it. Like it's very, very interesting with military. I think it's just because you're used to being yelled at and told what to do that like you're like, oh, go sleep. And they're like, that sounds great. So
Yes, that's probably what I just needed to hear
mhm.
was like in bodybuilding. Like so yes, so that's one thing I wanted to stress like I think with a lot of young athletes, those that embrace the team no sleep mindset,
Mhm.
you're actually deteriorating yourself. Can you tap into that? What happens to your body as you begin to pretty much take sleep away as you get older?
I mean, I wouldn't even necessarily that as it even gets older. I mean, I treat some high school athletes as well, and they're up till midnight doing homework, and then they're up at 5:30 to catch up and prep before a test. And you can see they'll come in and they're like, "Oh, I had no go that at this practice or this game was just brutal. I just didn't have it." And my first question to them is always like, "Well, how'd you sleep?" Because they're so physically fit, there is no reason that they
Right.
should be in a downtrend, but
Hmm.
they just they once again they just need to know that like, hey, go to bed. You'll study better, you'll perform better, you'll test better, everything will be better. But just in terms of not sleeping, I guess the easiest one for men is testosterone levels. Testosterone levels plummet when you're under 8 hours of sleep.
Oh,
And like it's I was talking my brother and I were talking with the gym owner and we were like, okay, all these guys want to make their great gains and they're on these 10 different supplements. And he goes, but if you're not sleeping, he goes, your testosterone levels are already tanked to begin with. He goes, why would you even bother showing up? He goes, unless you're going to juice 24/7. He's like, there's no, he goes, if your test level should be at, I'm going to use an arbitrary 800. And he goes, but if you're getting 4 hours of sleep and you're at a quarter of what you should be at, it's like 200 milligrams of testosterone isn't much. That's basically the equivalent of an 80-year-old getting up out of bed.
wow.
So, um, yeah. So if you're tanking just your hormones alone will wreak havoc in your body. But then just allowing your body to recover. If you don't, if arbitrary, I'm going to use 8 hours because that's that's the research. I'm going to say research in parentheses because who knows? I can do 7. My wife might need 10. Like it
Right.
just
6.
I don't have a I don't have the number of what each person needs, but more than 5 is generally accepted. I think Einstein got like 4, but that was
Yeah.
brain.
The
Um,
like I've heard people say that so when I had my really high anxiety, right? I
mhm,
would be drained by the end of the day, doing
yep,
absolutely nothing. And so the more I slept, the more tired I was.
mhm,
Now that I'm much more aware and subconsciously and consciously and I eat better and I exercise more. I can around 5, 6 hours of sleep, I do extremely well. and I've learned that because I stress sleep a lot because I was a smack talker. I was like, oh, I can do an all nighter, and I realized I looked old. I
Mhm.
looked extremely old and miserable. But I think it's almost advertised to almost push yourself towards the limit as almost like a like way to push yourself, way to keep going. And what would you say to someone that has like physical goals and just stubborn with their sleep?
You're doing yourself a disservice. Um, is as simple as it gets. If if you know what your goals are, I would hope that you have researched what other people have done to get to that point, because most of those people have tried things and failed.
Hmm.
Um, and if most athletes, especially at this point, if you look at your CrossFitters, you look at your strongman competitors, they may work out 3 to 4 times a day doing what they're doing, but when they're not working out, they are literally doing nothing.
Hmm.
they they rest, they ice bath, they use Normatec systems, they use sauna, they'll just flat out sleep. So a lot of them really trust that they're when they're working hard, they're going to work hard. But when it's time to be done with that, they really know how to shut it
Shut
down.
down. That's good. So I want to get into that next about
Yep.
shutting down. So a lot of I've learned with a lot of overthinkers and people that are very high ridden in anxiety. And as an athlete and someone that is, as you know, I coach a team of powerlifters. And as we allow stress to take us, now let's talk about stress, right?
Okay.
So I want to share my next story with y'all
Hmm.
because I came in with like Chris has known me for 3 years. So if I come to him with a problem, he has we have gained a relationship to where if I came in with a neck issue, he know that's not normal. And not only that, Chris hears from the Lord, and Chris be all up in my business. Okay, so I was in so much pain in my neck, and I was like, man, Chris, I feel like Mike Tyson beat the crap out of me,
Yep.
and he knows that I'm training for a marathon. I'm not in the boxing ring, and so can you just do you remember what you felt in my neck when you?
I do. I
Okay,
do, because this is like, because this is not a normal Desi complaint. Like, this is just, I could probably count. I don't know. I've probably treated your neck twice in 3 years, maybe. Like, this is not a common problem for us. And she came in, she laid on the table. I put my hands on her neck and I was like, "What did you do?"
now you guys, I'm not exaggerating. Like this is why relationship is important. He knows my body very well through at my smallest at 150, I'm currently 200, and he knows all of my competitions. I'm very upfront, I'm very transparent, and I'm very honest about my training if
Mhm.
I overtrain and everything. So for my neck to feel like this, he knew that that was not normal.
And I started with the normal conversation with Desi about this. I was like, "Okay, how's your diet?" It's like, "What have you been doing for exercise? Where are your lifting numbers at? Are we at a point where you're trying to build? What are we getting towards?" And she's like, "No, everything's basically normal. I'm just building back into stuff. I'm not really like, I'm not necessarily, I'm Desi works hard because that's just who she is. So I expect that when she comes in. But when she's telling me that she's not pushing, I know that, okay, there's something else going on underneath this tissue, because it was so tense and so like, when the nervous system hits a certain point, there's a certain level of excitability in the tissue. Like, you can feel the tension, and it feels different for each person depending kind of emotions or what else is going on. And she definitely had very high tension levels in her neck, especially in the front of her throat.
No idea. No clue. I just knew I was in pain. So Chris is like, and it was around this time where I was sharing him like, I'm just gonna lay back low, keep the peace. But he did not know that. It was just my season of, I'm not gonna say nothing. And then Chris just goes, I think you have something to say. All right, Chris, mind your business.
Exactly what you said.
I was like, and that's exactly like around that time, around that season. Yes, it was time to set some things in order with my organization and with my team. And I was holding back, and it was affecting me physically so bad that he can feel it swollen right here.
Yep.
And then you shared this is that most women
I find tend not to speak or say what they need to say. In my length, I mean, to be honest, most of my clientele is female. It's probably at least 70% or higher. And all of them come in with almost, I shouldn't say all because that's just too general. A very high portion come in at some point or another with neck pain. And most of them I've developed enough of a relationship with to say, okay, what hasn't been said? What needs to be said? What else is going on that's leading to these symptoms that you're having? And a lot of women just don't speak up. There's just I don't know. I haven't been able to pinpoint anything beyond that, but I found that once they start to speak up, a lot of tension starts to dissipate. And they're like, oh my goodness, I didn't know it could feel this good.
Yes, it is mind blowing. But I did do what I was supposed to do. And the next time I saw Chris, believe it or not, it was completely different. But I wanted to share that part because he can work on my neck, for the hour every month. But if I didn't do what I was supposed to do, I would still have those pains to this day.
And I was, uh, I went online to look up emotional pain charts and see what there is. And there's kind of general like consensus of when there's certain. This one I thought was ironic since we were discussing neck. Is the neck is usually an indication of stubbornness or inflexibility.
Yeah.
Or the other one is that it can also be assessed as looking into the future. So this is another thing that you and I talked about when we were discussing the neck was women tend to be much more like forward thinking, looking to the future, and guys tend to be very present minded / looking to the past of where they were at. And that tends to be in the low back. I don't know why, but that is its.
Interesting.
The low back is also usually like fear of monetary fears as well. So if a guy is if the male is this is, I hate to use gender roles, but if the male was the head and the provider, he might be more concerned financially as well as looking back and to see what could he have done differently in the past to have changed his projection in the future. So this, by all means, this happens to both male and female, but in terms of what I typically see, men are generally more low back issues and women tend to be more neck issues.
Interesting. Very interesting. Yes. And so Chris is I'll never forget that. I was so amazed.
Yep.
And I think it's interesting because I'm like I appreciate stuff like that, but I have also learned that some people they hop from one answer to another hoping to find an answer that they like, and so they can stick with the person they like that answer with, but then don't get results. And so and you shared with me, like you say, we can temporarily fix the problem, but if the core issue is still there, the problem is going to continue to exist.
Yes. Yep, absolutely. And I didn't this, like Desi said, and I personally feel the same way with Desi. Desi has, I think we've both spoken into each other's lives in ways that we didn't realize at the time being.
Yeah.
So in terms of like Desi said, like it being from the Lord, I don't even know where I said it from. I was just like,
Yeah, it just
you
came out of nowhere, guys.
like there's I was like poking and I was about to say something about the texture. And instead of talking about the tissue, I was like, you have something to say. And she's like, no, I don't. So
I was like, mind your business, Chris.
yep. Hmm. Yep.
But
And next time you saw me, you're like, I'm going to admit this, but I'm not happy about it. You were right.
yeah, I do appreciate it. I do like um I always say like the answers follow me everywhere, no matter where I'm at. And
Mhm.
I am grateful for it because I just I just found it like I've never had neck pain like that in my life. And I was really trying to avoid something, and it's just and I like to share the story because you can hide, but you're still going to show that you're
Absolutely.
hiding something. And
And
so it like Chris knew nothing, and it was fascinating how accurate he was.
there's definitely there's also with emotional pain patterns, there's also fear avoidance patterns too, where people
Ooh, can you talk
where
about that more?
so we hadn't actually discussed this part at all. Where fear avoidance patterns are something that may have caused an issue in the past that you refuse to do now. Um, so, like for me, I've had 4 dislocated shoulders, and everybody's like, "Oh, you should never bench press again. It's terrible for your shoulder." And I was like, "Okay,
Mm,
I've never done it." And then I was like, man, I feel like I'm missing something in my workouts. And so one day I just was like, I'm going to go bench. I don't care. I'm just going to go do it and see what happens. It felt great. Like mentally, it was just so freeing to finally be like, oh, this fear no longer has to hold my body in check. I can actually go do this and do it safely. Same thing with people in terms of deadlifting, squatting. I mean, you see this a lot with people with squatting
yes.
with knee. Like, is it really the knee is a pretty simple joint. Like you really you have to have done something to kind of hurt the knee typically. Um, so when someone comes in with no history of trauma to a knee, I'm like,
Hmm.
is it really from this or is it something else? And the knees, uh, ironically, the emotional pain chart um, for the knees is pride and ego. So yeah,
Really? That
so
is fascinating. So, all
um,
right, let's dive right in that, Chris,
yep,
again.
yep,
Like,
yep,
so during my very painful stage of knee pains, it
yep,
was during a phase where I've expressed it. You read my book.
yes.
I was swimming in my pride and ego very much so. And so you have worked on my knees a
Yep.
lot. And can you share like what you work on to make sure that my knee unlocks a lot?
So your knee is definitely a little more complex. Like there's definitely Desi has a history of knee issues. So
People don't people think I'm exaggerating about my knees. Here you
uh,
guys go. Here it is, guys. Here's like me not like, or like I don't have that much like it must not be that bad.
so Desi's knees definitely don't have full range of motion, flexion or extension. History of meniscal tears. So in I personally believe that she has a this is I'm gonna say I think this is unofficial, but I'm gonna just kind of go with it anyways because we're on unofficial lines anyway, so we're unofficial. I think there's a piece of the meniscus that occasionally gets caught in the joint that locks up her knee,
A lot.
uh, and so kind of depending where Desi is in training and what she's doing, we've definitely had to unlock her knee more than once. And sometimes that's just use. It's tension in the quads, tension in the hamstrings, her calves. I mean, her calves are basically like stone. Like if you can turn like water into wine, come please touch her calves and soften them a little bit, um, because they definitely need to get just a little bit softer. but releasing the tension in and around the knees is typically like the quads get a bad rap, but realistically, if the other joints aren't moving, like the hip isn't moving well, if the ankle's not moving well, the strain generally goes to the joint in between, and that is usually the knee. So physically, yes, there are components like the meniscus for Desi that does catch in the knee, but with the other patterns that she's had in terms of like ego and things like that, the when they pop up, they do pop up physically too.
Yes.
For myself personally, I don't generally have a lot of like I always have aches and pains, and that's just like Desi. I push myself hard, but my manifestation of stress is fatigue. Like that's definitely mine. Is I'll be like, oh, I'm
Yes.
tired. I need to
So
go to bed.
I didn't know about the having big ego affects your needs. That's actually very fascinating, but I'm not surprised because I
Mhm.
had such bad knees for such a long time. But like you also know that I train hard because I know I can, but
Mhm.
I also ask myself the questions like, are you doing this for your ego or are you doing it for the self? Like I have this
Yep.
conversation when I push myself to the max because I don't want to do it and take a detour because I know that physically, like I'm not totally healthy,
Yep.
like physically wise. But if I humble myself and I take care of myself, I can do the things that a lot of people say I cannot do. So
Absolutely.
I literally had that conversation with myself all the time, and people think that's so foolish to even have that conversation with myself, but I've been able to do things that most people cannot do that are filled with their egos.
Yeah. And should you run a marathon based off of your knees? Medically, no. Like there's that's just as simple as it is. But I know that Desi's going to do what she needs to do, and she's going to work on herself to be able to do that. And I've psychologically we restrict ourselves far more than our physical capabilities.
Correct.
Far, I don't know what the technical number is, but it's different for each person. Some people can tap into that and go beyond, and some people
Yes. And
can't.
so Chris is a runner, guys. I don't know if I mentioned that, but he's a runner. So we have a conversations and
Mhm.
I do take his advice. Now, am I supposed to be able to run the marathon? Medically, the answer is no. Right. But I also know I can push myself mentally, but I see him as much as possible. I change my diet. I don't do things that will keep me all night. I'm aware of what risks to take. So I put a whole bunch of factors in and not just wake up one day and say, I'm gonna do the marathon because I know that physically I'm not supposed to.
Yep. And physically, I herniated a disc last year. I'm not supposed to be lifting weights again in the gym. I'm not supposed to be golfing. I'm not even supposed to be running again per the doctor. Um, and I don't have any pain, so I'm not gonna stop.
Right. And so and I really want to stress this guys like because I meet athletes that just like listen to one person and they're like, oh, you do, I can do it. But we also apply it to all the other factors in our lives. Like we take care of ourselves emotionally, we take care of ourselves mentally, and we also take care of ourselves physically to be able to do things that people and doctors say no to.
Yes. And I will say to your credit as a coach, you really force your athletes to look at the mental and psychological components of their workouts. And I would say almost more than you expect the physical component,
Oh
because
yes.
you know when they plateau, that is it a plateau because of fatigue and strength, or is it a plateau because of something emotionally, mentally that's going on? And I know you and I communicate frequently. Desi sends me quite a few of her athletes, and they do drive an hour to an hour and a half to come see me. And but when they come to see me, it's not just let's talk about how your physical lifts are going. We try to get into what else is going on, because if they're seeing me for their hip pain, back pain, shoulder pain, it's time to. I know Desi has also kind of nudged them at that point, just because Desi's always working with them and working to help them reach that next level with their mental preparation, not just their physical preparation.
Correct, because as you know, I'm a big believer that if you can emotionally and mentally take care of yourself first, then you can physically do what you think is impossible.
Mhm.
And I'm not only do I talk that and preach that, but I also live it.
Yep.
And so, and one of the last things I wanted to get into was, so when I did the half marathon, I recognized I had very, very weak legs. Like heart condition wise, we good. Like I was
Mhm.
able to, but physically, I learned my weaknesses. Like I was able to handle some things up to a certain mile, then I was just really pushing myself mentally. And so at one point, I had really flat feet because I was 300 pounds and I had flat feet. And so when I first started getting back in the groove of things, I bought extreme supportive shoes that did work, which I thought like this great revelation, right? At that time, those extra supportive shoes did work for that season, for that physical being. But as I improved physically, what I've learned through my conversation and relationship with Chris that having something overprotective was only harming me because after that half marathon, my ankle was like boom.
Yeah, it was.
And I was like, what happened? Like, I've never had ankle problems before. And do you remember that conversation, Chris, about the overprotective shoes?
Yep, a little bit of that. This shoe was good for what you needed, and it was a good guardrail to keep you functioning where you needed to go. But at some point, we have to remove that boundary and take the next step and give you something else
I feel
to
like
work.
Chris is preaching right now. I feel like Chris is preaching right now. This is a Sunday sermon right here, guys. When he told me that, I was like, what do you mean? I still have my like my guard. I still have my pacifier in. Like, I would not
Yep,
change my shoes. I bought the same shoe
yep.
over and over again because like I had flat feet. So the fact that I was able to run again, I was so happy that I was able to run with these protective shoes, but I wasn't flat feet no more.
Nope.
And so but having those extra cushion made it worse for me. And I was like, oh, excuse me, Pastor Chris, what is going on here? So he
Hmm.
recommending these shoes, which I've been wearing, and like I have well, like other things that we have to work on as far as my ankle, but the other original problem went away from that. So it was like mind blowing. So
So
yes, talking what you did with my ankle.
So what happened with Desi was with these shoes that were too corrective, they were I hate to say too safe. Like it was just too safe of a shoe for her. So instead of the body's natural ability to pronate, which is the foot, so if your foot's arched, it should naturally just come down a little bit. Should never be pancake flat, which was unfortunately where Desi was coming from, was incredibly flat foot. But as you get stronger, as you lose weight, foot structures, things change, especially as we age too, the foot gets tighter. But so Desi couldn't actually pronate her foot. Pronation gets a really bad rap in running because everybody overpronates. I'm gonna say that in a general sense. And but pronation is a part of life. It happens throughout the body. Every time you squat, every time you move, something is pronating, something is supinating. It's just fancy terms for either receiving weight or basically pushing off. um, so Desi's shoe was blocking pronation, and so she was actually running on the outside of her foot, which completely caused compression through her ankle joint, and then it was translating into the knee as well. um, And so I was like, you got to get rid of these. Like, this has been a shoe you've been in forever, but we need to get motion back and we need to take this safety net off and get you into something that you can move in. And so I worked your foot and ankle over, I think, for 40 minutes that day to
Mhm.
make it move.
Right.
And
So when I tell you guys, it was like this. And again, I'm gonna stress relationship
yep.
because he also knew the history of my shoe, and he also knew that was not normal, and he was able to identify exactly what needed to be done. And could I have gone to a doctor? Yes, but I don't have a relationship with my doctor like I do with Chris. And so when I went to him, he was able to identify exactly what my ankle needed. He worked on it for 40 minutes. Like, I don't want to use the word pop back in, but it was pretty much pop back in. And I swear I can't even exaggerate. The next day, I was able to see my ankle bone.
Yep.
And so um if you're an athlete, it's important to have a relationship with some sort of professional.
I agree.
Some sort of professional. Like, a lot of people don't want to spend the time or the money for it, but if you also want to be an athlete longer or long term, or even just taking care of yourself, having an on and off relationship with just random people, um, someone's going to miss the mark.
Absolutely. And I mean, there are times where I've treated you and we're 40 minutes in and I was like, this isn't it.
Hmm.
It's time to go work something else. This is not the problem. Um, I, it happened the other day. I was like, oh, someone was like, this is the problem. My ribs have been killing me. This is what's going on. I was like, oh, we'll get to that last because it'll be a quick fix. Running 15 minutes behind schedule because I was like, now I have to solve the problem that I said was easy. That is no longer. That's just how my brain. I love a puzzle. So
Yeah,
uh,
and then I'll even share like how I hurt myself deadlifting because that was definitely ego lifting. I decided I did something dumb. Like, I knew it was dumb, but I was like, I'm gonna
yep.
show them. And I thought I pulled my back, but what in reality is I pulled my oblique, my one of my abs, which
Mhm.
is still tender to this day. Like, that was almost a year and a half ago. But um relationship is important. Chris is
Absolutely.
out of Holden, Massachusetts,
Yep.
and he's very popular because he's great at what he does. Um, but he also is very intentional with what he does because he cares what he does, and it's a great thing. I like I said, I have three massage therapists that I go to, and relationship is very, very, very important. I think I've seen it with my eyes too many times that people just don't have the time. I'm guilty of it.
Yeah.
I'm guilty of missing my appointments, skipping my appointments because I don't have time. And now that I'm 43, I'm like, man, I don't want to live in the glory days.
Hmm.
I just think too many people live back in the day. And so I don't want to do that. And so now I purposely make all my appointments. Like,
Hmm.
leaving work was very hard for me back in the day in the 30s. And now I'm like, no, I'm putting myself first going forward. And so would you go ahead with say I was gonna ask you one more question.
Okay, so I was gonna say, in terms of like building the relationship, Desi does have a few other people that work on her. But I don't think I've ever tried to even find out what they do for you for massage wise because I don't I am goodness, I've never done a nice massage for you. Like
No, no, like, this is not the spa. Like, this is not
this,
Chris's spa. Like,
this,
we're working.
yeah, there is no music, there is no scented anything. It's you're gonna get worked on. That's just what
There-
it is. And
yes.
I, I don't take offense if you say this isn't for me. It is not for everybody. And I tell people, if you are looking for traditional massage, there are people that are way better at it than I am.
Yes, this is um uh real quick, Chris, can you share, and we can any and with like finishing thoughts, why did you go into massage therapy?
So I got into massage therapy basically through physical therapy. As a physical therapist assistant, I can do massage inside a clinic with the supervision of a PT. Um, and I was doing a lot of massage work with clients, and I was like, these people are just getting better than the people that I'm just doing exercise with. Um, so it became a passion. It became what I wanted to just be really good at doing. And you connect with people differently. I can bark at you exercises, but there's no relationship like you're discussing. There's no emotional vulnerability with people to help get them beyond that point. I can
Mm-hmm.
tell you, okay, to protect your knee, you're going to deadlift, you're going to do clamshells, you're going to do glute walks, I could list out 20 different exercises to help your knee. Some people just need their quad rubbed for 5 minutes and to talk about the problem of the day. And they get off the table, they're like, I feel so much better. Like, great, now let's go exercise. But that was when I really wanted to develop my touch of what I could feel and what I could help people with. I don't want people to have to see me forever, but I want to help people get beyond where they're at to improve to get to what they want to do. Now that does turn into a long-term relationship with people because they're like, oh, you helped me, so I'm coming back to you, which is totally fine. But my goal is to get you independent and doing what you want to do, where you don't necessarily have to see me, that you want to see me for a tune-up, and then we build on the stuff that we've been working on.
Yes, and folks, because he's very passionate about it, anytime I send one of my athletes to Chris, I tell them the backstory. And so with the backstory and plus with the physical, he's able to find plus like this and this equals this needs to be done. And so being upfront and transparent he's been able to help a lot of my athletes. And even like yesterday, yeah, Nefty was like, I can't wait to see Chris. Like she was struggling with her squats, and she was like, I want to just see Chris. Like because they've been able to develop that relationship to be able to get to more than just like, oh, let me just fix your knee. It's okay, what's really going on? Okay, so then we can help you become more mobilized through doing this and this to be able to reach your goals.
Mhm.
So, well, any last words, Chris? Because we can go on forever. Like I have
I
so many stories.
could probably go. I could go. I mean, it's almost 9. I could probably go for another couple hours of just patient experiences. But no, I'm always happy to with clients, even if you can't come up, I'm happy to try to find people in your areas to send people to. The hard part is I know what I've worked on to build to where I'm at, and it's hard for me to send it to somebody else in terms of say, okay, go see them because they're going to do what I do.
Hmm.
I don't know many people that do that. um, but I'm always happy to even have a phone conversation, text message to say, okay, this is what you're looking for, and try to help you out that way. Because I know that I'm not close close for a lot of your, probably even your listening audience, in terms of convenience of driving out to Holden, which most of your athletes were like, is Holden Western Mass? I was like, no, Holden is Central Mass. It's just above Worcester. That's
It's
all it
almost
is.
a different state, but that's right. But
I
yes,
know 495 is the line of demarcation to Western Mass, but
it's far, guys. It's far, but it's
uh,
worth it. It's
but
definitely worth it because I it's it's been life changing for me. I'm able to do the marathon because of the people I've met. I promise you, like he's like with the and he's never seen none of my MRIs. He's never seen none of my X-rays or even talked to my doctors. He knows because he's been working on it for the past 3 years. So and the fact that I'm able to do something impossible because of relationship and be able to become honest and upfront. So I wanted to like bring because like you don't have to say like, oh, my life is done or I can't do this no more. There are ways, but you have to be upfront, transparent, honest, and have relationship.
and I agree 100% with that. It's about relationship. It's about I may do things a little differently, but once you build rapport with someone, you can realize what the possibilities actually are. Versus, I can have a patient come in and I can look at them and go, okay, this is what I think. But if they don't buy into it, if they don't believe what I'm telling them, if they aren't willing to work on the things
Correct.
outside of what I'm seeing, because I refer to psychologists, I refer to nutritionists, I refer to strength coaches to help people get beyond, but they're within networks and people that I trust. And if they typically, they know if it's coming from me, I've kind of screened them for X, Y, and Z, and that's why they're coming to the next level. And that relationship then builds. And people come back and say, this person didn't work. I've known I can send you to other people.
Mhm.
So that relationship is important to be able to develop and run with. I mean, I think there's probably people that you've sent me that probably wouldn't come to see me unless it came from you being a trusted source with your
Correct.
app.
Correct.
So,
Because, but I I've also had so many relationships prior to, I pretty much know what I'm looking for now. And so the athletes that come to me, some of them haven't had the past bad experience like I had, to be able to identify that this is jackpot, guys. And so they pretty much trust what I say, but do all of them believe it to the level that I do? Not all of them, but um one day
yeah,
maybe they will. But like
it,
I said, go either, so sometimes a lot of people assume that the door is always going to be open. Not all the time.
mm,
But for me, oh, I know. I know jackpot when I see jackpot. Cause like so, but yeah. Thank you, Chris, so much for
thank
taking
you.
time to do this. I appreciate you. And I have an appointment with you coming up soon. I don't know
Yes,
when.
next week or two, I think. So we will see how things go from here, and we'll get you, like I said, we'll get you to the finish line,
Yes, it's going to happen anyways.
one
Chris
way or the
knows
other.
it's going to happen no matter what. Like, if I have to do a handstand, he knows like my mindset. But physically,
Mhm.
the goal is physically to be able to do it. Like I told him, to be able to finish the marathon without going to the tent.
Yep.
I'm gonna finish regardless. So
And even if you go to the tent, you still finished.
yeah,
So
no matter what. But yes, thank you so much, Chris, for your time.
you're very welcome, Desi. Thank you.
All right.